It was long before I was even born when my parents used to live in a quiet village surrounded by endless green fields. My father worked in the nearby farmland, and my mother spent her days doing household chores. Life there was simple, almost too simple. There was no electricity back then. As soon as the sun went down, the entire village would sink into darkness. People would light oil lamps, finish dinner early, and disappear into their small houses before night took over completely. By 7 p.m., the silence was thick enough to hear your own heartbeat. The only sounds were the croaking of frogs and the occasional whisper of the wind brushing through the tall crops. One night, my mother felt the need to go to the washroom. In villages like ours, the washrooms were not inside the house, but built far outside, beyond the backyard, near the trees and bushes. It was pitch dark, and she took a small kerosene lamp with her. The air that night was strangely heavy, and the moon hid behind thick clouds. My mother later said she had a feeling an uneasiness crawling up her spine, as if someone was watching her from the fields. She tried to ignore it, and kept walking through the narrow path, lined with wild grass and old bamboo trees. Just as she neared the washroom, she heard it. A sound soft, trembling like someone crying. It came from the direction of the dense bushes nearby. At first, she thought it was a child. The voice was thin, fragile, and filled with pain. My mother froze. Her hands shook as she held the lamp higher. Ki, ora, she whispered softly. No answer, just the crying. She took a cautious step forward. The flame of her lamp flickered in the wind. The closer she got, the louder the crying became. But there was something unnatural about it. The sound didn't echo like a human voice, it felt heavier, deeper, like it came from somewhere beyond this world. Then the crying stopped. The silence that followed was so sharp. She could hear her own breath trembling. Slowly, she turned her head toward the bush, and that's when she saw it. A figure was standing there. At first glance, it looked like a woman, but something was wrong. The body was thin, almost too thin. The skin pale like ash, and the eyes were glowing faintly red under the dim moonlight. Its hair was long and tangled, covering half its face. My mother couldn't move, couldn't scream, she just stood frozen, staring into that face that didn't belong to a human. Then it smiled. Not a human smile, not even close. Its lips stretched far wider than they should, revealing teeth black, jagged, and sharp. The air suddenly grew colder. The smell of wet soil and decay filled my mother's nose. Before she could even run, that thing let out a shrill, twisted laugh. A sound so high and broken, it pierced through the still night like shattered glass. That was the last thing my mother remembered, because the next moment, the world went black. She fainted right there, in front of the washroom, the lamp falling beside her and extinguishing in the damp soil. When she woke up, it was morning. The villagers had found her lying unconscious near the bushes. She tried to tell them what she saw, but no one believed her. They said it was just her imagination, that maybe she saw a shadow or a passing woman. But my mother knew. She knew what she saw wasn't human. And months later, I was born. No one knew. That night's encounter had marked our family forever, that something had followed my mother home that night. Something that would one day come back. For me, I was born a few months after that night. The night my mother saw it. No one ever spoke about it again. My father said silence would make the shadows forget, but shadows never forget. From the very beginning, I wasn't like other children. My mother used to say I would stare at the ceiling for hours, my tiny eyes following something invisible. Sometimes, I would giggle softly at thin air, and sometimes, I would scream at nothing. My father thought it was childish nonsense. My mother didn't. She knew. There were nights when she would wake up to the sound of footsteps circling my crib. Soft, careful, someone was walking barefoot around me. When she looked, there was no one. Yet the floor was cold and damp, as if someone had just been there. One evening, my mother noticed a strange mark on my left shoulder. 5 faint, finger-shaped bruises. She cried silently that night. My father grew restless. Finally, they went to a kabirai, a spiritual healer from a nearby village, known for dealing with things that belonged to the other side. The kabirai didn't speak much. He just looked at me once, and his expression changed. His calm eyes grew tense. He touched my forehead, muttered a few prayers, then looked at my parents and said in a low, grave voice, "Something came with him. A shadow from before his birth. It follows him still." My mother broke down crying. My father begged for a solution. The Kabiri nodded slowly and went inside his hut. After a long time, he came out with a small, dark piece of cloth, tightly wrapped and sealed with red thread. "This is a tabbage," he said. "A protection charm. It will keep the spirit bound. But remember this. Never open it, not even by mistake. If it's ever removed, it will return." He tied the talisman around my neck. I was only a few months old, but the moment it touched my skin, I stopped crying. The air around the room felt lighter, calmer. For the first time in months, my mother said she slept peacefully that night. Years passed. I grew up like any normal child. The strange staring stopped. The nightmares faded. The whispers in the dark vanished. The talisman stayed around my neck, old, worn, but unbroken, until the day it disappeared. I was in class to then, a bright, sunny morning. My mother was combing my hair before school, when her eyes suddenly froze on my neck. The talisman was gone. She searched everywhere, the bed, the floor, the washroom, my school bag, nothing. It had vanished. I didn't understand why she was so scared. I laughed and told her maybe it fell off, but she didn't laugh. Her hands were trembling. Her face had gone pale. That whole day, she barely spoke. That night, before I went to bed, she told me not to worry, but I could see the fear behind her fake smile. Midnight came. The house was silent. I lay in my small bed, watching the ceiling fan spin slowly. Everything seemed normal, but somewhere deep inside, I felt something missing. Not just the talisman, but a strange emptiness around me, like the air itself had changed. At around 2:30 a.m., I woke up suddenly. The room was colder than usual. The window curtain was moving, though there was no wind. Then, faintly, I heard a soft sound. Someone crying. At first, I thought it was my mother. Maybe she was awake. Maybe she was upset about the talisman. But then I realized the sound wasn't coming from their room. It was coming from somewhere closer. From my room. From the corner. The crying grew louder, low, broken sobs, echoing against the walls. My heart pounded in my chest. I pulled the blanket over my face, shaking. The crying didn't stop. It came closer, and then, slowly, it turned into laughter, a low, raspy laugh that didn't sound human. I wanted to scream, but no voice came out. My body felt frozen. I couldn't move. The air grew thick. The smell of something foul, damp, and rotten filled the room. My eyes watered. My head spun, and right before I lost consciousness, I heard it again, that same laugh. The one my mother heard years ago near the washroom. The same voice that had waited all these years. It had found me. Morning came as if nothing had happened. The sunlight filtered through the bamboo shutters. The birds sang, and the world looked the same. But something inside me had changed. I didn't tell my parents about the crying or the laughter. I couldn't. The memory of that voice still crawled under my skin. For a few days, everything seemed normal again. My mother smiled, though her eyes often lingered on my neck, as if still searching for the lost talisman. My father said prayers at night, burning incense sticks, muttering something under his breath. Maybe they, too, could feel it. The heaviness that had returned to our home. That week, the nights started feeling longer, colder. Every night, when I went to bed, I felt a strange pull, like someone was waiting for me to close my eyes. The shadows on the walls seemed to move even when the lantern flame was still. I would often wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my throat dry, feeling like someone had been standing beside my bed just a moment before. One particular night, I remember clearly. It was raining outside, a soft drizzle that tapped gently on the roof. The sound should have been calming, but it wasn't. The air felt wrong again. The smell of wet soil had returned, not fresh, but old and heavy, mixed with something rotten. Around m, I woke up. At first, I thought it was thunder, but then I heard it again. That same crying sound. This time, it was louder, closer. The voice wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the house. I sat up in bed, clutching my blanket. The crying echoed softly, like someone sitting in the corner of my room, weeping quietly. I looked toward the sound, but the lantern had gone out. The room was drenched in darkness. "Ma," I whispered. No reply, just the crying. It grew heavier, turning into sobs, then into something like choking, gasping, as if whoever it was couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. The sound wasn't only in my ears now, it was inside my head. And then it stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my skull. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then, something shifted under my bed. A scraping sound, like nails dragging against the wooden floor. I froze. My hands went numb. I wanted to call my parents, but my voice wouldn't come out. My eyes were fixed on the dark gap beneath my bed. The smell grew stronger, the same rotting stench from that night. I saw something move, a shadow shape crawling. My breath hitched, and then, a whisper soft, almost tender, but cold enough to stop my heart. "You forgot me." The words came from beneath me. I felt the edge of my blanket lift, slowly, then a sound, a giggle, not human, wet, broken. I leapt off the bed and ran toward the door, but before I could reach it, the crying started again, louder than ever, echoing from every corner of the room. The windows rattled, the air turned icy. My hands shook as I grabbed the doorknob. Locked. I didn't lock it. My parents never locked it. But it wouldn't open. I turned back toward the bed, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Two red eyes glowed from under the bed. They blinked once, slowly, and then, the laughter began again. Not one voice, but many, layered, overlapping, whispering, giggling, moaning. The room felt alive with voices that weren't mine. I fell to the ground, covering my ears, screaming. But the laughter didn't stop. It only grew louder, more distorted, until it sounded like the entire house was laughing at me. Then suddenly silence. The doorknob clicked open by itself. I ran barefoot, crying, straight into my parents' room. My mother woke up startled. My father grabbed a lantern. When they came back to my room, it was empty. Everything was in place. The bed, the table, the curtains, nothing had moved. But the smell remained, that foul, decaying stench. My mother held me close that night. She didn't ask questions. She didn't have to. She already knew what was happening. The thing she had seen before my birth, the shadow that once cried in the dark, had found its way back. And this time, it wasn't going to leave. The nights after that were never the same again. Every shadow felt alive. Every whisper of wind sounded like a breath against my ear. My mother tried to act normal, but her eyes followed me everywhere. My father barely slept. The whole house was drowning in an unspoken fear, the kind that creeps into your bones and stays there. Days passed without peace. Nights passed without sleep. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday. The day was quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds seemed to avoid our backyard. The air was still and heavy, as if the village itself was holding its breath. My father left the lamp burning longer than usual that evening. He said he had to finish some work, but I knew he was afraid of the dark too. When dinner ended, I felt an uneasy calm inside me, like the world was pretending to be peaceful. My mother tucked me into bed, kissed my forehead, and said, "Don't be afraid tonight, you're safe here." But her voice trembled. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. I could hear the soft tick of the old wall clock. Each second felt louder than the last. I tried to think about school, my friends, anything to distract myself from the silence. Then, sometime past midnight, I heard it again. A sound faint at first, like a distant wail. It came closer, a woman crying, the same voice, the same broken sobs that my mother had heard all those years ago when I was still inside her womb. The same cry that had haunted our lives ever since. I sat up slowly. My heart thumped against my ribs. The air felt colder, heavier. I could see my breath in the dim light of the lantern. The crying grew louder. Now, it wasn't distant. It was inside the room. And it wasn't just crying anymore. It was mixed with laughter, a horrible, broken sound that echoed like a child choking on joy. My blanket began to move. Something cold brushed against my leg from underneath. I froze, afraid to breathe. Slowly, I lifted the blanket, and the smell hit me first. A smell of rot, of earth, of something long dead. Then, before I could move, something grabbed my ankle. A hand, It was ice cold and damp, with long, sharp fingers that wrapped tightly around my skin. I screamed, or tried to, but the sound got trapped in my throat. The hand pulled harder, my body slid down the bed. I could hear the laughter now right beneath me. A woman's voice, whispering and giggling all at once. "You lost it. You set me free." My nails dug into the bedsheet as I tried to hold on. My legs thrashed helplessly, but the pull grew stronger. It was dragging me under the bed, into the darkness that smelled like death. In that moment, I felt something else. The same presence my mother felt years ago. It wasn't just evil, it was hungry. Half of my body was already under the bed when I managed to scream a single, desperate cry that shattered the silence of the house. Everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. I was lying in my bed. My whole body ached. My throat burned as if I had been screaming for hours. My parents were standing over me, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. The entire house was filled with people, neighbors, relatives, everyone whispering. My mother was crying. My father's hands were trembling. I didn't understand what had happened until I tried to sit up and felt the pain in my leg. I looked down. On my ankle was a mark, 5 deep, dark bruises, shaped exactly like human fingers. Everyone said it was nothing, that maybe I hurt myself in my sleep. But my mother knew better. She told me later that they had heard my scream around AM and rushed into my room. But when they entered, I was alone. There was no one else there. The bed was cold, and beneath it only darkness. That same day, my parents sent me to my grandfather's house in another village. From that night onward, the crying stopped. The laughter vanished. The smell disappeared. Everything went silent. Years passed. Nothing strange happened again. The house we once lived in still stands, abandoned now, covered in dust and silence. But sometimes, my mother says, when the night is very still and the wind passes through the fields, she hears it again, faint, distant, a woman's cry, and every time, she whispers to herself, it never left, it's still waiting for him. The end. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.